Kia ora, it's Mike Atkinson. This presentation is looking at a cliff-top safety system that can help you safely access the top of a climb or top of an abseil without shock loading the system and without relying solely on your Prusik as your primary anchor. There are many different ways to do these cliff-top safeties, and this is just one way. When to set up a cliff-top safety system is a judgment call, and there are a lot of factors to consider. The primary thing I always come back to is if you are close enough to the cliff edge where a trip, slip or faint will see you head over the cliff, then you need to be tied into a safety system. As mentioned in the first slide, you're creating a system that prevents a fall from the top of the cliff, and the system I'm showing you minimises any shock loading of the system, and that the Prusik is never solely relied on as your primary safety. Things to consider, basic things like your footwear. Am I wearing correct non-slip footwear? Shoelaces done up, firmly fitting, clothes appropriate and not loose, baggy clothing I could easily trip on. What's the surface at the top of the cliff? Is it loose, slick, limestone, flat or rounded? So what is the terrain at the top? Is it wet, windy or icy? And you may decide that depending on the environmental factors that you end up doing a different system based on those environmental factors that you might do on another day. And distractions is another consideration. So when you're working with ropes and slings at the top of the cliff, they are distractions and easily can just help make things go wrong at the top. Time pressure and of students waiting, also considerations to take into your thoughts. Finding an anchor at the top is one of your first things to consider. The number of different options here. Obviously, the anchor needs to be a reasonable distance from the cliff edge, probably at least a body length away from the cliff edge. Linking bolts together, if there's bolts at the top, is always good. One large secure rock bollard that doesn't move or vibrate, or having a sling or rope that's going to roll off the back of it, or one decent sized tree works well. You can also link together place protection pieces. So if you want more information on that, see the place protection presentation. So once you've created your anchor, so here we're linking two bolts with a sling and with a focal point knot here, locking carabiner. With your rope, now this can be a dynamic or a static rope, and obviously it doesn't need to be a full length rope, just enough that it gets from the anchor out to the cliff edge. So that's your first task, is to measure the rope, throw the rope out to the edge, so the end of the rope is just by the edge of the cliff, or as far as you want to go, and then it trails back to your focal point here. Once you've got that distance from the edge of the cliff, the rope coming back to your focal point, you tie a clove. I tend to tie a clove hitch here. You can tie an overhand on a bite or a figure eight on a bite. That's totally fine. The clove hitch I find is useful just because if I have got a little bit too much rope out or not enough rope out, then the clove hitch is easily adjustable for those little bits of amounts of ropes taking in or letting out. So once you've tied the clove hitch, pull the end of the rope that's out by the cliff edge back towards you, tie in with a rethread figure eight, or just how you'd normally tie into the rope when you're climbing, into your harness. So this is the end of the rope that was at the cliff, tied in with the rethread figure eight, and the rope runs back to the clove hitch here at your anchor. The next step is to attach a clam Hoist Prusik just below where your focal point knot is, so just below your clove hitch. And once you've got the clam Hoist tied on the rope, clip it back to a locking biner on your belay abseil loop on your harness. As you're going out to the cliff edge, now you're keeping the prusik above you, so the prusik's always got quite firm, a bit of tension on it, and you're walking backwards to the edge of the cliff, keeping that prusik always above you. Now the system is set up so that when you get to the point you want to get to at the cliff edge, the rope that you're tied into should be tight. So there shouldn't be any slack in the rope past where you want to go. So that should be your end point here where the rope comes tight. This avoids any shock loading onto the system. So if you're not relying solely on the prusik for that. Another option when you've got an awkward cliff edge to deal with, especially ones that roll over like at Albert Terrace that are harder to access the top anchors than with the standard setup with just the prusik and tied back into the end of the rope, is to add an abseil device like an ATC to the single strand rope that is below your Hoist prusik, and that gives you a bit more control, especially getting over rounded edges. Final thoughts on cliff top safety. Be very careful top of the cliff. A lot of people get very casual around cliff top safety, especially recreational climbers. Always play it very cautious. All it takes is one moment and it's all over. So just be very, very vigilant around the top of the cliff top safety and be extra cautious.